Hello and welcome to the WIHS Journal, Public Affairs from 104.9 FM. I'm Paul Kretschmer. On today's broadcast, Dr. Ragy Girgis, a psychiatrist and Christian in New York City, will discuss his new book on Satan, Demons, and Psychiatry, exploring mental illness in the Bible.
Sure. Well, I'm a psychiatrist, a medical doctor. I went to medical school at the University of Pittsburgh, and then I came to Columbia here in New York City, where I am now, for all of my psychiatry training. I specialize in schizophrenia and psychotic disorders. I'm a full-time researcher. I'm actually an associate professor at Columbia, where I research schizophrenia, developing new medications. I also use brain imaging to understand the brains of people with schizophrenia better.
In your case, which came first, the psychiatry or discovering who Jesus is?
Well, that's a great question. I totally agree with you. A lot of people see some sort of, or sense some sort of dichotomy or dialectic between psychiatry/mental health and Christianity. My family's been Christian for many generations, for as long as, we know. So I've always been Christian. That's been the most important part of my life, of course, and then psychiatry came later.
When did you decide that you wanted to pursue that? Was it during your undergraduate years in school, or did you go off to college with the intention of becoming qualified to work in that field?
In college, I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. Eventually, I settled on medicine, but I knew nothing about psychiatry or really medicine, but certainly not about psychiatry before I entered medical school. And then in medical school, I was exposed to all the different fields of medicine. They were all very interesting, but nothing was like psychiatry. And I'm the type of person who really gets involved in what he does. I knew I would simply devote myself to whatever I choose. I'm a very kind of passionate type of person. And so once I participated in my psychiatry rotations, and I was exposed to schizophrenia, autism, Alzheimer's disease, those sorts of conditions that are just so devastating, it became very clear to me that I was meant to be a psychiatrist, and that would be something I would very easily devote many decades of my life to.
What examples in the Bible can you cite where we see Jesus healing someone who has issues in their mind, and he reaches in with his power and in effect treats them and leaves them in a better place than they began when a story begins?
Thank you. There are many. I think the two that most people would identify are his exorcisms, quote-unquote exorcisms, especially, for example, the Gadarene demoniac. This is the young man or two men, or I guess it depends on which book one reads, but either way, we'll say one man who was kind of belligerent, and they say he was possessed by a demon. Jesus cured him from what I think was mental illness. He instructed the quote-unquote demon legion to go into the pigs, and then the pigs all ran into the lake. That's one example. And again, from my vantage point and the way that I see it, this person probably had mental illness, particularly a severe psychotic disorder rather than demon possession. And then there were a few other stories like that in the New Testament where Jesus clearly healed someone, cured their mental illness.
Do you encounter people in your studies that tell you that they have been told in the past that if they would just let themselves be hospitalized or be given brain-altering drugs that they will be better, and that someone who talks to them doesn't understand why they would think a personal faith in anything really religious in nature, why anything of that sort would be something that would not help them?
Well, correct me if I'm not answering your question or if I'm not understanding it correctly, but a lot of patients definitely come to me having had experiences such that or in that they were by someone within some sort of faith or faith institution or otherwise would tell them that they just, they need to see a psychiatrist, they need to take medications, they need to go into a psychiatric hospital or something like that, and there would be some resistance to it. It happens the other way, too. I mean, it happens both ways, which is obviously very unfortunate, but I mean, this type of thing happens all the time, and I think the cause is similar to both, and the similar cause is the stigma of mental illness, both in communities of faith and otherwise. I mean, I'm Christian, so I know the most about the Christian community. That's just kind of what I know. But this is universal in many communities.
How often have people been told that they should be seeking professional treatment, but they resist because within the faith community, let's just say a community that's connected with Christianity, that if they just pray more or if they just try to resolve relationships with people more or do something more, that somehow that kind of work will change things in ways that, frankly, from my perspective, I wouldn't understand how that could happen.
That's a great question. I can't quantify it in terms of 10, 20% or whatever. I can tell you a lot, though. It's just very common. It's not rare. It's not uncommon. It's common. I would say the majority of people that I treat from faith communities or otherwise have had an experience like that. And so it ends up taking a long time or longer than it should for people who have some sort of psychiatric condition or mental illness to see me rather than not.
Would you say that the Lord has chosen to use the field of psychiatry to help people? In other words, God has any range of tools that he wants to have in order to make things happen that bring him glory. Would you characterize psychiatry as one such tool which, when used in light of what we know about our Lord, he uses that tool to reach down to his people rather than simply being a disconnected discipline that has nothing to do with God at all?
I love this question. I would say emphatically yes. God, Jesus, God owns, the world. He owns science. He owns human emotion. He owns all of these things. And so psychiatry, being one of the medical sciences, is owned by God. This is his.
At what point did you begin to write the book on Satan, demons, and psychiatry exploring mental illness in the Bible?
Thank you again. My father had wanted me to write this book for a long time because he also saw and sees the stigma of mental health in the church. And he knew a lot of people when he was younger, a lot of his friends who had mental illness, but there was so much stigma about it in the church that they really didn't reach out until it was too late. So he had wanted me to write this for a long time. I knew enough about psychiatry to write it. I didn't know enough about theology in the church. I mean, I'm very, very Christian, whatever that might mean, but I didn't know enough about theology. I hadn't read enough theology, so it was only until recently when I was able to read enough about theology to feel that I could write the book. I'm still an amateur theologian, that is, but I thought I had read enough, or I knew just enough to be able to write a book and not sound completely ridiculous.
What can you do or say to help people draw the analogy between people who lived a long time ago, but people are people, and help them understand that what they may be going through can be very painful or very oppressive to them personally, but it can be dealt with and overcome through the combination of what the Lord has taught you in psychiatry and what you understand in your relationship with him, that combination can, in fact, be the answer for whatever they may be struggling with.
Well, I would say two things. One is religious and one is maybe less religious. The first is I would just give people examples from the Bible, and this is one of the reasons I wrote the book. The Bible is actually replete with examples of people with mental illness, and I'm not just talking about the young men who were psychotic, and may or may not have been demon-possessed. Yeah. I'm talking about Moses, Jeremiah, Elijah, Jonah. All of them were severely depressed. All of them wanted to kill themselves. They were suicidal. And there are many other examples. So that's probably my first approach. And then the kind of more secular approach would just be to draw analogies with other, so-called physical conditions like high blood pressure and diabetes. Everyone accepts that those are medical conditions. They're biological, genetic, whatever that means. But what I tell people is that psychiatric conditions such as anxiety, depression, ADHD, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, they're every bit biological and genetic, and even more so. Someone who has a vulnerability, like a genetic vulnerability to ADHD or schizophrenia or whatever, would has almost no chance of not developing that condition later in life. Whereas, as most of us know, most cases of high blood pressure, diabetes, those sorts of conditions are actually quite preventable as long as someone were to eat a healthy diet, exercise. Most cases of high blood pressure, diabetes, those types of things are preventable. Mental illness, not the case at all. Very biological, very genetic, much more so than these other common medical conditions. And so those are probably the two things I say to most people.
Because of your description of mental illness as something that is in many ways on the level of not preventable because there are things going on inside a person's mind, why do you think, if you do, what causes you to look at people and think to yourself, how can people be prejudiced against people who struggle with something that in many ways is not really within their control? It's as if people sometimes who consider themselves level-headed look at someone who's struggling and condemns them as if they're doing something that they could choose to walk away from or to embrace fully, and because they believe a person embraces that kind of condition, therefore there's something wrong with them, because why would they want to do that? Why would they want to choose to do that?
Thank you. I go into this to some degree in my book, and I'm going to tell you what I think, but I'd be very interested in hearing your own thoughts, because you obviously sound like you understand this whole sort of discussion very well. One, I think the media doesn't help, and how the media portrays psychiatric illness for sure. And number two, I would say that sometimes people with psychiatric illness behave in ways that are just considered unpleasant. Very psychotic people, for example, can be very belligerent and loud and unpleasant, and that just kind of rubs people the wrong way. Whereas someone with diabetes, is generally not acting unpleasant per se, or at least not as part of the condition. And I think, there are a lot of things.
In terms of the readership for what you've written, then, who do you anticipate will read it, and who would you like to read it as a way to gain some of the insights or things that can help a person live, that you have come to conclusions on, that you want to share with other people so that they may step out likewise and take away from what you have to say and what you've learned, so that they may live better than they may be now?
Thanks for the question. Again, I think, the book is directed towards Christian believers or any Judeo-Christian, person. But in particular, I think if I were to really hone in on it, I would say that I would want people who either themselves or a family member, friend is really struggling with mental illness and is not willing to understand it or willing to reach out to someone for help because, again, they think that it's more about volition and bad parenting and immorality than about medicine and science and biology. So if there were one group, I'd say that would be the group to whom I, am kind of directing and focusing this book.
If a person wants to know more about what you have to say, then where do you direct them for contact information for your book or anything else that you might have to say then, Doctor?
Thank you. Well, my book is on Amazon, so it's pretty easy to find Amazon or Goodreads or anything. People could just type in the name of the book on Satan, Demons, Psychiatry. People could just type in my name. I have a very unique name, so it's pretty easy to find me, either again on Amazon or even on my own website, my webpage on the Columbia University Department of Psychiatry website. My name is just Ragy Girgis, Girgis. And those are the easiest ways to find me, really.
For further information about today's broadcast, call us at 860-346-1049, 860-346-1049. The opinions expressed are those of the participants, not necessarily those of the staff or management of the station. I'm Paul Kretschmer on the WIHS Journal, Public Affairs from WIHS, Middletown.